20 years. That's how long Sarah and I had been married when everything started falling apart. 20 years of building a life together, of weathering storms that would have broken weaker couples, of choosing each other every single day even when it wasn't easy. I wasn't perfect. God knows I had my flaws. But I was faithful. Even when that redhead at the office made it clear she was interested, even when my college buddy's divorce left him prowling bars and begging me to join him, I came home to Sarah. Every night. That's what made the changes so jarring. It started with the phone. Sarah had always been casual about her cell, leaving it on counters, asking me to check her messages when she was driving. But suddenly it was glued to her hand, screen down on every surface, password locked for the first time in our marriage. She'd smile at texts in ways that made my stomach twist, little secret grins that never seemed directed at anything I'd said or done. "Who's that?" I'd ask, trying to keep my voice light. "Just work stuff," she'd say, but her fingers would curl protectively around the device. Then came the wardrobe changes. Sarah had always dressed nicely but practically. Comfortable jeans, modest tops, the kind of clothes that said married mom without apology. But she started shopping more, coming home with bags from stores she'd never frequented before. Tighter shirts, lower necklines, skirts that rode higher than anything she'd worn since college. When I complimented her new look, she'd shrug and say she was just trying to feel good about herself. I wanted to believe that. I tried to believe that. The distance grew like a cancer between us. Conversations that once flowed naturally became stilted, punctuated by her checking her phone. She'd sit across from me at dinner, physically present, but mentally somewhere else entirely. In bed, she went through the motions with mechanical efficiency, her mind clearly elsewhere. When I tried to talk to her about it, she accused me of being clingy and insecure. "You're being paranoid, Michael," she'd say, that edge creeping into her voice that I'd rarely heard before. "Can't a woman make some changes without her husband turning into a detective?" But I wasn't being paranoid. The evidence was everywhere once I started looking for it. She'd developed new interests, a sudden passion for hiking that required her to be gone every Saturday morning. She'd joined a book club that met Wednesday evenings and somehow never had much to say about what they'd read. Her explanations were too detailed, too rehearsed, like she'd practiced them. The criticism started around the same time. Everything I did was wrong, or at least not quite right. The way I loaded the dishwasher, how I handled conversations with the kids, my choice of restaurants, movies, even the way I breathed when I slept. Nothing was ever said directly, just little cuts that accumulated like paper cuts until I felt raw and bleeding. I began to recognize the signs of what my grandfather used to call a quiet disease, the kind of suspicion that eats at you from the inside, making you question everything you thought you knew. I'd catch myself analyzing every word she said, looking for lies in her expressions, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The security cameras were my decision, born from desperation and a need for truth. We'd had a few break-ins in the neighborhood recently, which gave me the perfect cover story. I told Sarah I thought we should look into a security system, and she agreed it was a good idea. I jumped on it with the enthusiasm of a drowning man grabbing a life preserver. If she was innocent, the cameras would prove it, and I could stop feeling crazy. If she wasn't, well, at least I'd know. I had them installed professionally, 4 cameras covering the main living areas, the front and back entrances, motion-activated and connected to an app on my phone. The technician explained how everything worked, how the footage was stored in the cloud, how I could access it from anywhere. Sarah seemed pleased with the security they provided, never suspecting they were really there to monitor her. She had no idea they would become the instruments of her downfall. The night I made that decision to install those cameras, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept peacefully beside me. I'd spent 20 years building a life with this woman, and now I was preparing to spy on her. The weight of that felt crushing, but the alternative, living in this limbo of doubt, was worse. I didn't want to be right about my suspicions. I wanted Sarah to prove me wrong, to show me I was just a paranoid husband going through a midlife crisis. I wanted our marriage to survive this rough patch and emerge stronger. But as I listened to her steady breathing in the dark, part of me already knew I was preparing for war. The divorce papers hit our kitchen table like a slap in the face, the manila folder sliding across the wooden surface with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Sarah had walked through our front door at 8:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I'd been watching the clock, wondering where she'd been for the past 3 hours after her book club supposedly ended. She didn't even bother with pretense. No hello, no how was your day, no explanation for why she was late, just that folder tossed onto the table like it was the electric bill. "I'm done," she said, her voice flat and businesslike. "I've found someone who makes me feel alive again." The words hit me like a physical blow. 20 years of marriage, reduced to a simple declaration that she'd found someone better. I stared at the folder, my name typed neatly on the tab. Thompson, Michael, divorce proceedings. "Sarah, what?" I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We both know this marriage has been dead for years. I'm just making it official." She stood there in our kitchen, wearing a new dress I'd never seen before, looking at me like I was a stranger she couldn't wait to get away from. The pain started as a tight feeling in my chest, like someone was squeezing my heart with a fist. I thought it was just shock, just the emotional impact of hearing my wife tell me she wanted out. But it kept getting worse, spreading down my left arm like liquid fire. "Someone?" I managed to gasp. "Who?" "Does it matter?" She glanced at her phone, always that damn phone, and her expression showed impatience, not remorse. "Look, I need you to sign these tonight. My lawyer says if we can get this filed by tomorrow, we can have the whole thing wrapped up in 60 days. The crushing sensation in my chest was getting worse. I tried to stand, but my legs felt weak. The room seemed to tilt sideways, and I had to grip the edge of the table to stay upright. "Sarah," I wheezed, struggling to form words around the growing panic. "Something's wrong. I think I'm having a heart attack." She looked at me with the kind of exasperation you'd show a child having a tantrum. "Oh, please. Don't be so dramatic, Michael. Just sign the papers." The pain was radiating down my arm now, and my vision started to blur at the edges. This wasn't emotional distress. This was real, physical, life-threatening. I'd watched my father die of a heart attack when I was 15. I knew what this was. "Call 911, I gasped, clutching my chest as I sank into a chair. "Please, Sarah, call 911. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, or just annoyance that I was inconveniencing her. "This is just stress. Sign the papers and you'll feel better." I couldn't breathe properly. Each breath felt like trying to suck air through a straw, and the pain was spreading across my chest like someone was driving nails into my sternum. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone, but my coordination was shot. It clattered to the floor. "Help me," I whispered. Sarah stared at me for a long moment, and in that instant, I saw who she really was. Not the woman I'd married, not the mother of my children, but someone who could watch her husband of 20 years collapse in agony and feel nothing but irritation that it was interfering with her plans. "I can't deal with this drama tonight," she said, grabbing her purse from the counter. "I have somewhere I need to be. Sign the papers, Michael. Don't make this harder than it has to be." And then she left. Actually walked out of our house while I was dying on our kitchen floor. I managed to crawl to where my phone had fallen, my chest feeling like it was caving in, black spots dancing at the edges of my vision. With fumbling fingers, I dialed 911, gasping out our address to the dispatcher before the phone slipped from my hand. The next thing I remember was being lifted onto a stretcher, an oxygen mask over my face, and a paramedic saying something about massive cardiac event and lucky to be alive. As they wheeled me toward the ambulance, I saw our front door standing open, exactly as Sarah had left it when she walked out on me. In the hospital, after they'd stabilized me and run their tests, Dr. Martinez explained that I'd suffered a significant heart attack brought on by extreme emotional stress. "Another 5 minutes," he said quietly, "and we might not have been able to save you." I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles and trying to process what had happened. My wife of 20 years had served me divorce papers, confessed to finding someone else, and then literally left me to die when I needed her most. The monitors beeped steadily around me, proof that I was alive despite her abandonment. The marriage was over, that much was clear. But as I lay there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the hospital around me, I realized something else. Sarah had made a mistake, a fatal, irreversible mistake that would define everything that came next. She'd shown me exactly who she was in my moment of greatest need. And now I knew exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. My son David arrived at the hospital first, still wearing his work uniform from the construction site, paint splattered on his jeans and concern etched deep in his face. My daughter Lisa came 20 minutes later, having driven straight from her apartment across town. They both looked scared, the kind of fear that comes from getting a call that says, "Dad's in the hospital." "Where's Mom?" Lisa asked, looking around the sterile room as if Sarah might be hiding behind the curtains. I'd been dreading this question for the past 6 hours, lying in that hospital bed and trying to figure out how to explain to my children that their mother had walked out on me while I was having a heart attack. How do you destroy someone's image of their parent without destroying them in the process? "She's not coming," I said finally. David frowned. "What do you mean she's not coming? Did she even know you were here?" "She knows." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what I was about to tell them. She was there when it happened. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the monitors beeping, the distant sounds of the hospital, but my children were absolutely still, processing what I'd just said. "Dad," Lisa said slowly, "what exactly happened tonight?" So I told them everything. About the divorce papers hitting the table, about Sarah's cold announcement that she'd found someone else, about collapsing with chest pains while she stood there checking her phone, about begging her to call 911 and having her tell me I was being dramatic, about her walking out while I was dying on our kitchen floor. "That's not," David started, then stopped. "Mom wouldn't do that. She wouldn't just leave you." "She wouldn't abandon her own husband," Lisa added, but her voice lacked conviction. I understood their disbelief. This was their mother, the woman who'd bandaged their scraped knees and stayed up all night when they had fever. The woman who'd taught them that family meant everything, that you never gave up on the people you loved. "David," I said quietly, "I installed security cameras a month ago. The footage from tonight, it's all there." My son stared at me for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. "Give me the login information." I watched him access the app, watched his face change as he scrolled through the timeline to 8:47 p.m. He didn't say anything, just handed Lisa the phone and walked to the window, his hands clenched into fists. Lisa's face went white as she watched the footage. I couldn't see the screen, but I knew what she was seeing. Her mother tossing divorce papers on the table like trash, telling her father she'd found someone better, and then walking away while he collapsed in agony. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, Dad, she really—" The door opened, and Sarah walked in carrying a bouquet of flowers and wearing an expression of practiced concern. She must have learned I was in the hospital from someone. Probably called our house and gotten the message from whoever had found the front door standing open. "Michael, sweetheart," she said, rushing to my bedside with a performance worthy of an Oscar. "I came as soon as I heard. Are you okay?" "What happened?" The transformation was stunning. Gone was the cold, impatient woman who'd served me divorce papers. In her place stood the devoted wife, all tears and worry and gentle touches. "You know exactly what happened," David said from the window, his voice deadly quiet. Sarah turned to him with that same concerned expression. "David, honey, I don't understand." "We watched the footage, Mom." Lisa held up the phone, the screen still showing the damning evidence. "We saw everything." For just a moment, Sarah's mask slipped. I saw panic flicker across her face before she recovered, but it was too late. My children had seen it too. "That's not," she started, then seemed to realize how trapped she was. "You don't understand. It's complicated." "Complicated?" David stepped away from the window, and I could see the barely controlled rage in his posture. "You left him to die, Mom. You walked out while he was having a heart attack. I didn't know he was really—" "Bull—" Lisa snapped, a word I'd rarely heard her use. "We watched it. We heard what you said. Don't be so dramatic. I have somewhere I need to be. You knew he was dying and you left anyway." Sarah looked between her children, seeing their unified front, their absolute disgust with her actions. The flowers in her hands suddenly looked ridiculous, a pathetic prop in a play no one was buying. "You left him to die," David repeated, his voice getting louder. "And for what? Some guy who's 10 years younger and doesn't even want you now?" "How do you—" Sarah started, then caught herself. "Oh, we know about him," Lisa said coldly. "We know about the hiking. We know about the book club. We know about all of it, Mom. The question is, was it worth it? Was your little midlife crisis worth destroying our family?" Sarah's composure finally cracked completely. "You don't understand what it's like," she said, tears starting to flow. 20 years of the same routine, the same conversations, the same everything. I felt like I was dying inside. And then I met someone who made me feel alive again, who made me remember what it was like to be wanted." "So you decided to kill Dad instead," David said flatly. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, because that's exactly what she'd tried to do, even if she hadn't admitted it to herself. She'd been willing to let me die rather than miss a night with her lover. "I want you out," I said quietly from the hospital bed. "I want you out of our house, out of our lives, and I never want to see you again." "Michael, please, get out," Lisa said, standing up, "before I call security and have you thrown out." Sarah looked at her children one more time, seeing nothing but disgust and disappointment in their faces. The family she'd destroyed for a few months of excitement was gone forever, and she was finally beginning to understand what she'd traded away. She dropped the flowers in the trash can on her way out, not even bothering with any more apologies or explanations. The door closed behind her with a soft click. David came over and put his hand on my shoulder. "We're with you, Dad. Whatever you need." Lisa nodded, tears in her eyes. "She's not our mother anymore. Not after this." As I looked at my children, my loyal, loving children who'd chosen their dying father over their selfish mother, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Sarah had made her choice when she walked out that door. Now we were making ours. The divorce proceedings were a massacre. Sarah walked into that courtroom 6 weeks later expecting a standard 50-50 split, maybe some alimony since I earned more, possibly even the house since she could claim emotional distress. What she got instead was a front-row seat to the complete destruction of her legal position. My lawyer, Janet Morrison, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who specialized in high-conflict divorces. When I'd first shown her the security footage of that night, she'd watched in complete silence, then looked up at me with the expression of a shark smelling blood in the water. "Michael," she'd said, "in 30 years of practice, I've never seen evidence this damning. She didn't just abandon you, she left you to die during a medical emergency. No judge in this state will show her mercy." She was right. The footage played on a large screen in the courtroom, every damning second of it. Sarah's cold delivery of the divorce papers, her dismissal of my medical distress as drama, her walking out while I collapsed on our kitchen floor. The audio was crystal clear, capturing every callous word. Judge Harrison, a stern woman with silver hair and no patience for nonsense, watched the entire thing without expression. When it was over, she turned to Sarah with barely concealed disgust. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, "in 25 years on the bench, I have never seen such a callous display of abandonment during a medical emergency. You literally left your husband to die. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Sarah's lawyer had tried to spin it as a panic response, claiming she was so shocked by the divorce conversation that she wasn't thinking clearly. But the footage made a liar of that argument. There was no shock in her voice, no panic in her movements, just cold calculation and impatience. "Your Honor," Sarah said, standing shakily, "I know how it looks, but I was confused and scared." "Confused?" Judge Harrison's voice cut through her excuse like a blade. "You were confused about whether to call 911 when your husband was having a heart attack? You were scared of what, exactly? Missing a social engagement?" The divorce settlement was brutal and absolute. Sarah got nothing. Not the house, not half the assets, not a penny of alimony. The judge ruled that her abandonment during a medical emergency constituted extreme cruelty and awarded me everything. The 20 years we'd built together, the house we'd called home, the retirement accounts we'd contributed to, all of it stayed with me. The court finds that Mrs. Thompson's actions on the night in question constitute such extreme abandonment and cruelty that no financial award is warranted, Judge Harrison declared. Furthermore, given the evidence of infidelity and callous disregard for her husband's welfare, this court sees no reason to provide ongoing support to someone who was willing to let her spouse die rather than inconvenience herself. Sarah's face went white as the reality sank in. She'd expected to walk away with enough money to start her new life comfortably. Instead, she was walking away with nothing but the clothes on her back and whatever assets were solely in her name, her car and a small savings account she'd opened separately. But the real kicker came that evening. I was at home, finally back in my own house after 3 days in the hospital, when David called me with news that would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. "Dad," he said, barely containing his laughter, "you're not going to believe this. Mom's boyfriend dumped her." "What?" "Lisa ran into Sarah's sister at the grocery store. Apparently, Loverboy found out about the divorce settlement this morning. When he learned that Mom was walking away with nothing, and I mean nothing, he suddenly remembered he had other commitments, broke up with her via text message. The poetic justice was perfect. Sarah had destroyed our marriage for a man who turned out to be exactly what I'd suspected, a gold digger looking for an easy ride. The moment he realized there would be no money, no house, no comfortable lifestyle funded by her divorce settlement, he vanished like smoke. She'd traded 20 years of marriage and the love of her children for a few months with a man who didn't even have the decency to break up with her in person once the money was gone. Over the following weeks, the social consequences multiplied. Word spread through our community about what had happened, not through gossip or rumor, but through simple truth. The security footage had been shown in open court, becoming part of the public record. Friends who heard about it were horrified. Neighbors who'd known us for years stopped speaking to Sarah entirely. Her own sister called to tell me she was ashamed of what Sarah had done. "I raised her better than that," she said, tears in her voice. "I don't know what happened to the woman I thought I knew." Sarah tried to contact me several times in the weeks following the divorce. Calls, texts, even showing up at the house once. But I'd learned my lesson about her true nature that night in the kitchen. I let every call ring through to voicemail, deleted every text unread, and called the police when she appeared on my property. The children maintained their position too. No contact, no forgiveness, no second chances. Sarah had shown them who she really was in that hospital room, and they'd made their choice accordingly. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I learned through mutual acquaintances that Sarah was living in a one-bedroom apartment downtown, working retail to pay her bills, completely cut off from the life she'd tried to abandon. Her lover was long gone, her children wanted nothing to do with her, and her social circle had evaporated. She'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for that night when she threw those divorce papers on our table: freedom from our marriage. She just hadn't understood that freedom would come at the cost of everything else she'd ever valued. I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt something much more satisfying: justice. 2 years have passed since that night, and I'm sitting in my backyard on a Sunday morning, drinking coffee and watching my grandson play on the swing set David built last month. The heart attack changed me physically. I take medication now, watch my diet more carefully, exercise regularly, but the emotional changes run much deeper. I learned something valuable about people during those dark months. You discover who someone really is when they think it costs them nothing to show you. Sarah thought she could walk away from our marriage without consequences, so she showed me exactly how little 20 years meant to her. She thought she could abandon me during a medical emergency because there would be no witnesses to judge her for it. She was wrong on both counts. The security cameras she'd agreed to install became the instruments of her downfall, preserving every damning second of her callousness for the world to see. The children she thought would never learn the truth became her harshest judges when confronted with video evidence of her cruelty. The lover she thought would support her through the transition vanished the moment he realized she brought nothing to the relationship but baggage. My relationship with David and Lisa is stronger than it's ever been. Shared trauma has a way of bonding people, and watching their mother's true nature revealed brought us closer together. They call more often now, visit more frequently, and they've made it clear that any grandchildren will know their grandfather, but never their grandmother. David got married last year to a wonderful woman named Kate, who reminds me of Sarah from our early days: loyal, kind, family-oriented. The difference is that Kate has proven her character under pressure, supporting David through the aftermath of his mother's betrayal and embracing me as family without reservation. Their wedding was beautiful, conspicuous only for one empty chair that no one mentioned, but everyone noticed. Lisa is thriving in her career as a nurse, and she tells me that seeing Sarah's abandonment during my medical emergency actually strengthened her commitment to helping people in their most vulnerable moments. "I never want to be the person who walks away when someone needs help," she said once, and I could hear the echo of that night in her voice. The house feels different now, cleaner somehow, free of the tension and secrets that had poisoned it during Sarah's final months here. I've redecorated some rooms, made it fully mine in ways it hadn't been even when we were married. The security cameras are still there, but now they just provide peace of mind rather than evidence of betrayal. Sarah has tried to contact me periodically over the past 2 years. Birthday cards that go straight into the trash. Christmas gifts that get returned unopened. Phone calls that I let ring through to voicemail before deleting the messages unheard. She's reached out to the children too, but they've maintained their position of complete no contact. Through mutual acquaintances, I've heard fragments of her current situation. The retail job didn't last. She's had a series of short-term relationships with men who lose interest quickly. She's gained weight, lost friends, and according to her sister, spends most evenings alone in that small apartment, probably wondering how her life went so wrong so fast. The answer, of course, is simple. She made choices. She chose another man over her husband. She chose convenience over compassion. She chose temporary excitement over permanent family bonds. And when those choices led to consequences, she chose to blame everyone but herself. I didn't destroy Sarah's life. She did that herself the night she walked out while I was dying on our kitchen floor. I simply refused to protect her from the natural consequences of her actions and allowed the truth to speak for itself. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about how completely her life fell apart. The answer is no. I feel something much more valuable. peace. I learned that the best revenge isn't actively destroying someone who betrayed you. It's surviving their attempt to destroy you and building something better from the ashes they left behind. As I watch my grandson laugh on his swing, I think about the lessons this experience taught me. I know now that real love shows itself in moments of crisis, not in moments of comfort. I know that actions reveal character in ways that words never can. And I know that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to enable someone's worst behavior, even when that someone is the person you once thought you'd love forever. The sun is warm on my face, my coffee is perfect, and in a few hours, my children will join me for Sunday dinner in the house that Sarah tried to take from me. It's a good life. Not the one I planned, but the one I built from the ruins of the one she destroyed. And that's enough. More than enough. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.